My name was Luella Brinkley. I am 83 years old now, but no one by that name has existed for over 2 decades. To the world I left behind, Luella died on a rainy Thursday afternoon in 1999. Alone, penniless, and broken in a beige-walled nursing home just outside of Biloxi, Mississippi. At least, that's what the obituary said. They wrote it themselves. My children. All 3 of them. It ran in the local paper under notable deaths, right below the church bake sale and next to a lost dog ad. No service. No burial plot. No ashes to scatter. Just a blurb. Like I had never really lived at all. The day it was published, I was in another state. 1,000 miles away. Sitting at a corner table in a bustling cafe on the outskirts of Santa Fe. Sipping cinnamon tea. Wearing turquoise earrings and a wide-brim hat. No cane. No medication alarm. Just me and the life I had built from scratch. Under a new name. Cleo May. A name I chose with my own 2 hands. A name that never once had to beg for love. That obituary wasn't a mistake. It was a message. A closing chapter they hoped no one would question. Because if they had to answer for what they did to me, how they drained my savings, stole my home, left me in that facility without a word, they would have to face the truth. That they didn't love me. Not really. They loved what I gave. My kindness. My time. My quiet. They loved that I said yes. Until I couldn't anymore. The nurse at the facility handed me a printout of the obituary the day after it ran. "We saw this online," she said, confused. "Did you have other family? Someone who?" She didn't finish the sentence. I stared at the photo they had chosen. It was 20 years old. Me in a church dress, smiling at someone just off camera. I read the caption under it twice. Luella May Brinkley, 62, of Forestville, passed peacefully on March 18, 1999. She is survived by her 3 children, Pierce, Loretta, and Glenn. Survived. They used that word like it meant anything. I folded the paper and smiled at the nurse. Isn't that something? That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken but because I was free. They had killed me on paper. Which meant I no longer owed them anything. Not forgiveness, not explanations, not another inch of myself. And so, on a fog-draped morning 2 days later, I disappeared. I left my room clean, my medical bracelet on the pillow, and my exit planned with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime putting everyone else first and was finally done. I took nothing but a suitcase, the name Cleo May, and a plan. Now, 21 years later, I live in a Pueblo-style cottage in the hills of northern New Mexico. Paint. I teach young women how to weave. I have 3 neighbors who bring me chili stew and ask me real questions about my life. They know me. The real me. Not the ghost of a mother my children used to use as a doormat. They don't know I used to be Luella. No one here does. That woman is gone. And I never looked back. Until yesterday. When a stranger showed up at the gate. She was maybe 28. Denim jacket. Hair like fire and eyes that looked like mine did when I was still soft. She carried a folder, wore worry like a scarf, and introduced herself in a voice that trembled. "Hi. I'm Tessa," she said. I think you might be my grandmother." I stood frozen. That name. That face. That blood. It was like the past had reached through a crack in the earth and grabbed me by the wrist. "Grandmother," I said carefully. I found something," she said. "A notebook. My father's. He mentioned you. He thought you were gone. But I think you're her. Luella." Silence. The kind that splits your soul in half. I didn't speak. Not at first. But in that moment, standing there with the desert wind tugging at my dress and the sun casting long shadows behind us, I knew. The past had found me. And it didn't knock. It walked in. Now the question was, would I run again? Or finally turn around and face what I'd buried alive? If this moment grabbed your heart and made you want to know more, don't forget to like, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Before I became Cleo May. Before I shed Luella Brinkley like an old worn skin. I was a mother of 3, a wife of 41 years, and a woman who believed, foolishly, that love meant giving until you had nothing left. That belief nearly killed me. We lived on a quiet street in Forestville, Mississippi. A modest ranch house with flower beds I pruned every spring and a porch swing that creaked just enough to feel like home. My husband, Arnold, passed away just before his 67th birthday. His heart gave out in the garden, collapsed beside the tomato vines he'd babied like children. The real heartbreak began after that. With Arnold gone, the house felt like a boat drifting out to sea. I still cooked breakfast for 2. I still set his chair at dinner. I still told the air good night and waited for silence to respond. And then one by one they came. Pierce, my oldest, always the planner, always dressed like he had somewhere more important to be. He showed up 3 days after the funeral with documents in hand. Just to help you sort things, Ma. I figured we could streamline some of the finances. Streamline. What he really meant was control. He changed the utilities into his name. Moved my savings into a joint account. Said things like, "You don't want to worry about this stuff. Let him." 'Cause I was grieving. And because I believed he was helping. Loretta came next. She cried when she saw me. Cried like she hadn't missed 4 birthdays in a row. Cried like the daughter who used to braid my hair while I stirred cornbread batter. "Mama, I just want you to be comfortable," she said. "You shouldn't be cleaning or driving or paying bills. You raised us. Let us take care of you now." She moved into the guest room the next week. 6 months later, the guest room was hers, and I was sleeping in the den on a pull-out sofa with a nightlight that never turned off because her new boyfriend hated walking through dark hallways. And Glenn, my baby, the sweet one, quiet one, the one I never thought would turn cold. He stopped calling after Arnold died. I left messages. I sent cards. I made his favorite peanut brittle at Christmas and sent it FedEx with a note that said, "Love you always, even if you forget to say it back." He finally showed up 2 years later. With 2 duffel bags, a woman named Cheryl, and a thin smile that didn't touch his eyes. "We hit some rough luck," he said. "Just until we get on our feet." They stayed 9 months. By then, the house no longer belonged to me. My name was still on the deed, but the home itself, it belonged to their routines, their arguments, their piles of laundry and voices that filled the rooms with anything but warmth. Pierce took over the mortgage. Told me it was too much responsibility. Loretta sold half the furniture, said it was dated. Replaced it with slick modern couches that felt like sitting on plastic. Glenn borrowed money and never brought it back. I didn't recognize my life anymore. The rooms were filled with people who shared my face but not my spirit. My hands cooked their meals. My voice soothed their children. My pension bought their groceries. And yet, not one of them ever asked how I was sleeping. If I was lonely. If I missed Arnold. I started writing in a spiral notebook. Private thoughts. Silent screams. I wrote, "They love the convenience of me. Not the woman I am." And later, "I think I've become a room they pass through on the way to somewhere better." It all came crashing down the week of my 62nd birthday. I was in the kitchen icing a cake, one I had baked for myself, when I overheard them. They were in the living room. The door cracked just enough. Pierce's voice. "We need to start thinking long-term. Mom's not getting younger." Loretta. "You mean putting her in a home?" Glenn. It's not like she's really living here anymore. Silence. Then laughter. Quiet. Cold. Dismissive. I remember gripping the counter until my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry. I just stood there feeling like wallpaper. Something once beautiful now just in the way. A week later they took me on a tour. They framed it like a surprise. A facility with great staff, Mom. They have a garden. Piano room. You'll be safe there. Like I was a child. Like I was a burden being quietly wrapped and stored away. Place was beige. Smelled like antiseptic and reheated vegetables. They signed the papers that same afternoon. And I smiled. Said thank you. I packed only what they allowed. They called it a retirement transition. I called it abandonment. They visited twice that first month. Then came the calls. Then came nothing. Until the obituary. And now here I stood, 21 years later, face to face with the one thing I had allowed myself to believe was lost for good. Family. A granddaughter I didn't know existed. Elsa. She clutched the folder like it held her identity inside. My dad, Glenn, he passed last spring. Cancer. I was cleaning out his apartment and found this. She opened it slowly. Inside a notebook. My notebook. The one I had thought they'd thrown away. She flipped to the middle, revealing my handwriting. Faded ink, slanted cursive. They didn't read this, she said. But I did. I felt my knees weaken. You wrote about leaving, she said. About changing your name. About losing everything. I paused. About wanting to be seen. Covered my mouth. Tessa stepped forward. I wanted to find you. Not because I expect anything. Not because I need anything. But because someone should have listened. And I want to. I didn't speak for a long time. Then finally. I'm not Luella anymore. She nodded. I know. But I think Cleo May is exactly who you were always meant to be. And in that moment, the life I'd built, brick by brick, word by word, moment by moment, began to shift. Because the past hadn't come to destroy it. It had come to witness it. And maybe, just maybe, to make peace with it. Tessa sat across from me at the small kitchen table. Her fingers wrapped tightly around a mug of cinnamon tea. The same kind I had been drinking the morning she arrived. She didn't ask for sugar or cream. Just sat quietly, her knees bouncing beneath the table, eyes scanning the room like she wanted to memorize it. I thought I'd imagined you, she said finally. I raised an eyebrow. Imagined me. She nodded, brushing a piece of red hair behind her ear. The way Dad talked, when he did talk about you, it was like a ghost story. He'd mention you, then change the subject. Say you were gone. Never explained what that meant. Said it wasn't something I needed to worry about. Her voice wavered. But I always did. I said nothing. Because I didn't know what to say. I had spent 2 decades carving out a life that was never meant to be found. And now this young woman, this stranger with my eyes, was unspooling everything with the gentle pull of a sentence. You said in the notebook that you felt erased, Tessa continued. That the people you loved treated your kindness like currency. Flinched. I remembered that line. She pulled the journal out of the folder, opened to the exact page. I highlighted it, she said. Here. You wrote. They called it love, but it felt like payment. My warmth bought their silence, my sacrifice paid for their distance. I exhaled slowly. I was angry when I wrote that, I murmured. You were honest, she replied. There was a long pause. A silence that didn't hurt for once. Then I asked carefully, why did you come here, Tessa? She looked up at me, those wide, haunted eyes. Because I'm afraid I'm becoming like them. And blinked. Like who? My father. My aunt. My uncle. The ones who buried you alive. The words cut deeper than she knew. She swallowed hard. I didn't know what they did to you. Not really. Not until I read this. She tapped the journal. But I felt it growing up. The way they used people. The way love had conditions. Her voice cracked. The way Dad would tell me to call Grandma Loretta on Christmas but never said your name. That name, Loretta, tasted sour even now. Glenn was different once, I said. When he was young. He was tender. He used to draw on the walls and beg me to save the pictures before I painted over them. I held him through night terrors. He used to say I was the only person who made him feel safe. Tessa looked down. I think he got lost. He nodded. I know he did. We sat there for a long time. Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. I want to tell your story. I stared at her. I'm a writer, she said. Not published yet, but I've been working on a memoir. Until now, I didn't know what it was really about. I raised an eyebrow. And now you do. She nodded. It's about women like you. Who disappear. Who get pushed out of their own lives. Who carry families on their backs until their spines bend. And still get blamed for not standing up straight. I felt something move in my chest. A warmth I hadn't felt in a very long time. I want to tell the truth, she said softly. All of it. I got up and walked to the bookshelf near the window. Pulled down a leather-bound folder. Dusty, thick, tied with string. Inside were receipts. Letters. Medical forms. The discharge paperwork from the home they forced me into. Handwritten records of every withdrawal they made from my accounts. Even the draft of the obituary they never knew I saw. Proof. I placed it in front of her. If you're going to tell it, I said. Tell it right. Her eyes widened. You kept all this. I kept it because someday I knew the silence would end. That someone would ask questions. I stared at her, my voice calm. And that someone wasn't going to be my children. She looked like she might cry. But she didn't. She reached for the folder and placed it gently in her lap like something sacred. I want to stay a while, she said. Why? Because I want to know you. And because I don't want to go back to the world they live in. I nodded slowly. You don't have to. That evening we made soup. She peeled the carrots while I chopped herbs. She told me about her job, her terrible apartment, her desire to leave the city. I listened. Really listened. Not like someone nodding while the TV played in the background, but like someone who had waited half her life for someone to speak honestly at her table. At one point she reached for a bowl and froze. Wait. Is this your handwriting? I looked over. The ceramic bowl in her hands had faint black lettering scratched into the bottom. Umbi. My initials. Smiled. Yes. I made that years ago. Thought I lost it in the move. She held it like a treasure. You didn't lose anything, she whispered. They did. Later that night, after she'd gone to sleep in the spare room, I stepped out onto the porch. The sky above Santa Fe stretched wide and deep, full of stars that didn't seem to blink, just watch. I looked up and whispered, Arnold, you were right. He used to tell me, one day, Luella, you're going to stop being invisible. You're going to step out of the shadows, and the whole world's gonna have to squint just to look at you. Back then, I thought he was being kind. Now, I thought maybe he was telling the future. I didn't know what would happen next. Would Tessa write the book? Would my children find out? Would the life I built come undone? Maybe. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because for the first time in decades, someone didn't take my story from me. They handed it back. Word by word. With love. If this moment moved you, hit that like button, leave a comment for Cleo and Tessa, and subscribe to the channel. Tessa stayed. Not just for a night or a weekend, but she stayed. She bought groceries. She fed the hummingbirds on the back porch. She helped me repot the geraniums and reorganize my paint supplies. In the mornings, she brewed the tea just right. In the evenings, she read pages of her manuscript aloud like I was the only audience that ever mattered. And maybe I was. Each day she read, I heard pieces of myself come back to life. I remember how they all said thank you with the same breath they used to ask for more. I remember how silence was never peaceful. It was punishment. I remember that kindness without boundaries becomes fuel for those who would rather use you than love you. Her words were sharp and warm at the same time, like fire on a cold day. But one afternoon, as I sorted through old photographs in the sunroom, she walked in holding her phone, face pale. "They know," she said. I raised my head slowly. "Who?" She swallowed. "Your children. They found out." The publisher reached out to a legal contact for review. Somehow it got back to them. I set the photo in my lap. "Which one called?" "All of them," she whispered. I laughed, a dry, knowing sound. "That's more attention than I got in 15 years. She came and sat beside me. "They want to talk. They're shocked. Glenn is gone, but Loretta and Pierce are furious. Threatening lawsuits. Claiming defamation." I tilted my head. "You used real names." "No," she said quickly. "I didn't have to. The truth is sharp enough." I took her hand. "Good girl." She looked confused. "You're not upset." "I'm tired, not timid." We sat in silence, the breeze rustling the curtains like they were trying to whisper their approval. Then I stood slowly and walked to my desk. "I've been waiting for this moment," I said. "Just in case." I pulled out an envelope I had sealed 5 years ago. On the front, in neat cursive, it read, "To be sent only when they come asking." Tessa took it from me and ran her fingers along the edge. "What's inside?" "A letter," I said. "One they've earned. Word by word." 3 days later, it arrived in their inboxes, courtesy of my lawyer who had standing instructions. It read, "Pierce, Loretta, you found me. I suppose I should say, thank you, but I've learned not to hand out gratitude like spare change. You didn't look for me when I was living in a beige cell with cracked tile and lukewarm soup. You didn't look when I spent Christmas alone or when I laid awake listening to the voices of strangers down the hall instead of the children I raised. You looked for me now because the silence made you nervous. Because the truth finally echoed louder than your excuses. I want you to know, I'm not angry." I was. But anger is a fire that only burns the one holding the match. I let it go the day I stopped being Luella and started being someone I chose. Someone who didn't wait for phone calls that never came. You don't have to call me. You don't have to defend yourselves. Just sit with it. With the truth. With the choices you made. With the mother you buried while she was still breathing. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. And now I'm finally living like I was never supposed to be quiet in the first place. Cleo May. They didn't reply. Not right away. But a week later I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single card. It read, "I don't deserve forgiveness. But I will carry your words like stones in my pocket. Every step, every day." Pierce's handwriting. I folded the card and put it away. Not because it meant reconciliation, but because it meant he finally listened. Later that night, Tessa and I sat on the porch under a desert sky. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. I thought for a long moment. "I regret not leaving sooner." She nodded. Then she asked the question I wasn't expecting. "Would you ever go back?" I turned to her. "To what?" "A name. A house that isn't mine. a role they defined for me. No, she said. I mean, to show the world what living looks like when you stop waiting for permission. Smiled. I already have. The next week, a local arts collective invited me to speak at their women's conference. They had read a draft of Tessa's manuscript. They wanted me to talk about identity, about legacy, about what it means to choose yourself after everyone else has emptied your cup. The flyer said, Cleo May, the woman who vanished, and then decided to live louder than ever before. I stood on that stage wearing a flowing shawl and turquoise earrings. And I told the truth. That love without respect isn't love. That blood isn't thicker than betrayal. That sometimes, the only way to find yourself again is to vanish from the version of you that made everyone else comfortable. And afterward, Tessa took the stage beside me and read the opening line of her book. My grandmother didn't die. She was erased. But the erasure didn't hold, because the truth has a pulse, and it always finds a way to breathe. If my story speaks to you, show your love with a like, drop your reflections in the comments and subscribe to the channel. It started with a whisper. A few dozen people at the local women's conference. A few hundred views on a clip posted online. A gentle wave of emails from strangers, women mostly, who heard something in my voice they had been waiting to hear their whole lives. Then the whisper turned into a hum. Bookstores reached out. Podcast hosts sent invitations. Tessa's manuscript, once a quiet, trembling document tucked into a folder, became a bidding war. She called it The Woman Who Vanished. The subtitle, How I Found My Grandmother and How She Found Herself. I told her I didn't want my name on the cover. She nodded, understanding. But when I opened the first printed copy and saw the dedication, I wept for the first time in years. For the woman who taught me that you don't have to be famous to be unforgettable. For Cleo May, who made silence speak louder than applause. That book spread like wildfire. Not because it was polished or trendy or flashy, but because it was real. Because in every corner of this country, in every neighborhood and every apartment building and every tiny nursing home, there were women like me, forgotten, used, quieted. And they read it like a map out of the darkness. Within 6 months, I was no longer just Cleo May of Santa Fe. I was a voice on talk shows, a guest at panels, a face on flyers with phrases like live loudly, aging without apology, and the power of disappearing and becoming. Everywhere I went, women approached me, some young, some old, some holding copies of Tessa's book, others carrying dog-eared journals with stories they'd never told a soul. One woman whispered in my ear, I left my husband of 41 years after reading your story. I didn't even know I was allowed to. Another sobbed into my shawl and said, You made me forgive myself for not calling my mother before she passed. And a teenage girl, barely 16, stood in the lobby of a bookstore in Kansas City and said, You made me want to grow old someday. Because you showed me that it can be brave. I held her face in my hands and said, You don't have to wait until you're old to be brave. You just have to be tired of being silent. Tessa traveled with me everywhere. She took photos. She fielded interview requests. She brought me tea when I was tired, and tissues when I wasn't. At night, in hotel rooms with creaky beds and room service menus, we talked about life, about family, about the invisible grief we both carried. I thought I lost him, she said once, voice thick with emotion. Dad. I thought he was just a cold man. I nodded slowly. Sometimes people start out warm and lose their way. And sometimes they never learn how to love without needing something in return. She looked at me. Do you hate him? Pause. No. But I don't miss who he became. That answer gave her peace. More than I expected. And then, something I never imagined happened. Loretta came. It was a speaking engagement in Asheville, North Carolina. Small crowd. Book signing after. I was just about to leave when she appeared at the end of the line. I recognized her before she spoke. Older now. Gray streaks in her carefully dyed hair. Designer bag clutched like a lifeline. "Cleo," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. She stepped forward, eyes glassy. "I read it," she said. "All of it. Twice. And..." She opened her mouth. Then closed it. Then opened it again. "I didn't know how bad it was," she said. "Or maybe I did. I just didn't want to admit it." I said nothing. Because what do you say to the daughter who folded your laundry with one hand and signed your fate with the other? "I know I don't deserve anything from you," she went on. "But I wanted to say that I see you now. And I'm sorry I didn't then." I met her eyes. "Thank you," I said quietly. She blinked, surprised. "That's it. I don't need more," I said. "You gave me silence once. Today you gave me honesty. That's more than most ever find the courage for." She nodded, then stepped back into the crowd. And I let her go. Not out of bitterness, but out of peace. Years passed. Not many. Just enough to know that I had lived the way I was meant to. On my terms, in my truth. I celebrated my 88th birthday with Tessa, her partner, and 2 foster girls they were in the process of adopting. The house was full of laughter and balloons and lemon cake with thick white icing. I wore a crown made from twisted vines and wildflowers. Tessa made it herself. "You're the matriarch of the loud women," she teased. I laughed. And for once, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's story. Felt real. My health began to slip not long after. Quietly. Gently. Like my body knew it had finally said everything it needed to. Tessa sat with me in those final days, reading aloud from her second book, a collection of stories from women around the country who had written to us over the years. She titled it, "The Echoes of Cleo." I closed my eyes as she read them. One woman wrote, "I was erased in my marriage, in my church, in my own home. But then I read about Cleo May, and I stopped asking permission to live." Another, "My daughter asked who I wanted to be when I was little. I told her I forgot. Now, thanks to Cleo, I remember. I drifted in and out of sleep, but those words kept me company. They tucked me in. They lit the room from within. And a legacy I had written not with wealth or inheritance, but with truth. If Cleo May's journey inspired you, let her voice echo through your own life. Comment, subscribe, and remember, if you've ever been overlooked, erased, or taken for granted, it's never too late to write yourself back into the story. Loudly, proudly, completely.